In spring 2017, composer Verity Standen worked with producer Situations to create Refrain, a unique choral work devised with and performed by groups of male singers, many of whom had never sung in public before. Refrain was inspired by stories of conscientious objectors in the First World War, and the piece was staged during the centenary of the war in 3 sites with a particular connection to these stories. Places where men who refused to fight had lived, been imprisoned, or faced court-martial.
My name is Verity Standen and I am a composer based in Bristol. My main interest is the human voice. I really love working with voices who haven't sort of learnt very rigid rules and don't stick to sort of very traditional methods. I came at voice from an alternative way myself because I haven't learned music in the traditional way, and so I think that has always led me to want to share that with other people as well, to sort of show how accessible lots of different types of singing, and especially harmony singing and a cappella singing, is. Some people still feel very strongly about why people should fight for their country and why people shouldn't fight, and I think that's a really amazing thing to try and grapple with as a subject matter, especially when it comes to a musical reaction to that.
The journey of Refrain began at Richmond Castle in North Yorkshire, where Verity and Situations worked with English Heritage to explore the history of the site. In 1916, a group of conscientious objectors were imprisoned in the cell block at Richmond Castle while they awaited court-martial. These men became known as the Richmond 16, and the graffiti they drew on the cell walls remains visible today.
I was very lucky to be able to be let into the cells actually before I explored the rest of the site. And the cells had an amazing atmosphere to them, and it felt very sort of special to be able to be allowed into those rooms. It's quite a heavy, dense air, and all of the walls are littered with words and drawings, and what struck me was how many musical references actually were marked on each of the walls. Like, there were lots of pianos drawn, there were hymns written out, and actual sort of scored sheet music on the walls, which was a really lovely connection to sort of feel the musicality of the men who were imprisoned in there. I wrote down a couple of quotes that are on the walls that I found quite moving. You might as well try to dry a floor by throwing water on it as to end this war by fighting. And another one, break, break, break on thy cold grey crags, but oh, for a touch of a vanished hand and the sound of a voice now still. I thought that was also really beautiful. Okay, so 4, 5.
In each of the 3 locations, Verity and Situations worked with local partners to encourage men from across the community to join the project, whether they already sung regularly with a local choir or had never tried anything like this before. Over a number of weeks, Verity ran taster sessions and rehearsals with a small team of collaborators, developing the music in partnership with the local singers and adapting her composition to fit the possibilities of each location.
The Richmond Castle site is quite an open site, so it felt like the elements and birds and nature and the wind really affected how the composition sounded. So we wanted to sort of really plot that we could perform at all different times of day and see how that affected the music and how present it made it, and whether or not it felt more charged at night time as it did in the daytime. Something about being on site at dawn felt really exciting, because there's that beautiful hush and calm, just as the birds start to sing. And that just felt like a really, really special time to be able to bring these bits of song to life and let the castle really sort of sing out and come alive at that time of day.
When it came to the performances, audiences were encouraged to follow the song, to explore the site and go in search of singers.
When I was doing my initial research into the Richmond 16 and the cells, there was this lovely story about the men trying to sing with each other, but being in these 4 separate cells on one of the second floor inside the little tiny building. And you can actually see one of the scores written out of one of the hymns that maybe they might have been trying to sing. And the story is that there was a pipe that connected the cells so they could hear each other quite well, so they could speak to each other. And one of the prisoners would take the lead and he would sort of hit the ground of the cell, trying to keep the rhythm. I really love that idea of disconnection of voice, but really wanting to sort of come together and sing something.
The second site for Refrain was St Helens in Merseyside. In St Helens, the team worked with local organisation Heart of Glass to present the work, which played out across the streets of George Quarter, featuring a Masonic hall and a Quakers meeting house, the oldest building in the town. The first man to face trial as a conscientious objector was Ernest Everett, a schoolteacher who lived and worked in St Helens. While many conscientious objectors took up non-combative roles in the army, some, like Everett, declined any part of active service. Over the course of the war, he was sentenced and imprisoned multiple times for refusing orders, and his tribunal initiated a national debate.
So in St Helens, we had a much smaller group of men. So that meant that the sound worlds of each of the compositions had to shift quite a lot, so we could still have as much impact. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The process of teaching the men in St Helens, they asked a lot more questions and really wanted to sort of know the background of what was behind each song and why they were doing that and what that meant. And that was we created a really lovely, open, honest room because they were just so alive with wanting to really get to grips with it all. A particularly lovely moment from St Helens was where the men formed 2 lines down the alleyway facing each other, and I asked them to sing a song that meant something to them. So it was the only part of the performance that had words, and all of the men were singing at the same time, and the audience could walk down that alleyway. You really got a sense of the different personalities of those men who had taken part in the project, and it was a real sort of fractured, broken beauty, sort of getting snapshots of a bit of Ella Fitzgerald, and then you get a lovely little local folk song from St Helens, and a really beautiful insight into those men and what they brought to the project. There's another piece of music which I called Folk Pulse, and that was inspired by a little bit of research that I undertook that was specifically to do with Quakers and how, if you're a Quaker, how you sit with each other and you sit in silence, and it's very respectful and very peaceful. A much calmer, stiller piece of music that was all about breath and all about hitting your notes that you were singing, sort of really connecting with the other singers who were in that space.
The final location was Newhaven Fort in East Sussex. Verity and the team partnered with the Attenborough Centre for the Creative Arts to stage the work in the fort, which is now a military museum complete with a complex network of underground tunnels. One of the largest work camps for conscientious objectors was in Seaford, just along the coast. Men were put to work building the road between Seaford and Newhaven, and some were brought to the fort itself to face court-martial. From the gun turrets perched atop high cliffs, one can look out towards France, where many conscientious objectors were sent against their wishes.
By the time we got to Newhaven, we'd all grown in confidence, knowing that we were creating something that people could connect with. So that, I think, when it came to meeting the final group of men and tackling that site, I think we were really excited to be able to bring that to Newhaven and to the fort and to those men. The acoustics in the fort were incredibly exciting. There were some spaces that the echo would last for over 10 seconds, so that musically was really, really exciting. So compositionally, I felt like I could throw everything at it. It felt like a real great celebration. At the very beginning, we were able to use one of the acoustics in the Grand magazine, which was just huge. The echoes were just massive, and as an introduction to the site and to all of those men that you were about to encounter, that was such an exciting way to introduce them and sort of to say, hello, this is who we are, we're going to sing for you for the next half an hour, 40 minutes. That felt like a beautiful, big, fat celebration of a sound. And I know that a lot of the men, that was also their favourite moment as well. I hope that the places where we performed Refrain, the echoes of that still continue and remain for the audience whenever they walk down that street, or maybe whenever they visit the castle, that they will remember the men singing there and what that meant and how that sounded and how that felt, and that's a change that stays with them.